Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to race number 18 of the second season of the G-Force Hijinx Clothing Cup Series as we take to the concrete mile track known as Dover International. Only 7 races left until we eventually crown our champion in the season finale. But it's going to be a tough one here today. This track is known as the Monster Mile for a reason, because usually Miles the Monster Very, very hungry. Seth Cole alongside of Anthony McCurry. Now, Anthony, one of the big things I was thinking about here coming into this race is if we go back to last season when these drivers took to the track, it was all about preserving those rear tires because as we know, the 87 cars, they would step out, you'd have those rear tires getting heated up quite a bit, and we know this track is very abrasive on the Goodyears. But in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the drivers dealing with a tight sensation, so it almost seems like this is going to be typical Dover for them in terms of trying to preserve that right front.
Indeed, it is. I mean, this is essentially a different car than when we started the season with. So these drivers have gone into races, especially in races that we've gone to so far, or at tracks that we've gone to so far this season. You think back to like Richmond, coming up, we got North Wilkesboro that we're going back to. We've got a couple of tracks that we've gone to so far that they have approached it one way, and now they have to learn how to do it again. This time around, this is the track that they'll have to relearn how to do. And the right front definitely going to be a big talking point tonight. The track, like as you said, it's a very abrasive surface, concrete the whole way around, and you're going pretty much flat out, pretty much the entire way, save for letting off the throttle to make the turns. But, you know, banked track, nowhere to hide, walls closed in. It's going to be tight door-to-door racing all night long.
14 drivers in the field here tonight, only 13 took time. The points leader, Hank Steinmiller, will be starting shotgun on the field, back on the outside of row 7. Cooper Johnson gets his first pole of the season. Our Daytona winner for the first time this year is going to lead us to green, and we're about to be underway here in the Mason-Dixon 125 at Dover. James Terrian was ready for that green flag outside of row 1 and leads them into turn 1. I'm not necessarily certain if it was a case that he got going or Cooper Johnson may have spun the tires early on.
Johnson certainly got off slow, and I saw him trying to get through the gears. It looked like he wasn't quite comfortable with the way his car was going up, but nonetheless, he falls back into second place behind Tyrion. Jeff Green now gets into third place. He's now jumped through Jake Hounshell to get to the second, make that the third place position as they go into lap 2.
Jake Hounshell is the defending winner of this race, back when this was the 6th race of Season 1. Hounshell still chasing his first win on the season. What a place it would be, as he still mathematically is in the hunt for the championship, even though there's so few races left on the schedule.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he is that close. He really can. If he pulls off a miracle and gets to, when we get to Atlanta, and get some good finishes under his belt, have some of these drivers in front of him in the standings that have some hardships. If he's not that far back, he's only got to get to, I'm looking here, and he's only 172 points back, I think, is what I'm looking at. So if he can get some good finishes, he could possibly get through the field pretty quick. He's only got Steinmiller, Johnson, and Morse in front of him, and right now, Cooper Johnson running second. And our points leader having to fight his way through the field. I think he had to start at the back of the pack, now running 6th. So long race to go, but in 7 races left, Jake Hounshell, one of the long shots, but definitely one of the favorites.
Yeah, and Steinmiller is flying. He started, as you mentioned, tail of the field. Oh, got a spin back there. I think that might have been James Goshen in the 85, looping it around in the middle of 3 and 4. Caution is going to fly. Hank Steinmiller, in the span of 5 laps, Anthony, moved up 8 spots from 14th to 5th. So that car obviously is very, very fast.
Yeah, he was cutting his way through the field when he was going past both the Houndshells. So something in that car has gotten him really going the right direction. He might also just know how to run this track a bit better than everyone else does, and the setup might be to his liking. But that crash brings everyone back to somber pace, and it was just simply, I think, misjudging the entrance to turn 3. I think he just got a little bit too high on the racetrack.
Yeah, we did right there. You saw he was trying to get to the outside of Randy Koking and just couldn't quite do it, so loops it around, didn't hit anything. Looks like he will continue on and should be good to go here when we go back green.
Only slight damage to the side of the 85, and that's something that these drivers have been a bit wary of as well, is because we started the season, we had a different damage model to these cars, and now we have a completely different one. So things like tiny bumps onto the wall might not have meant much, but now they might mean a little bit more, as he's stuck on pit road still. It might be something a bit more sinister on the 85, because he's in his box, and he's been in his box for a long time.
I didn't see him make any contact with the right rear into the outside wall when he looped it around, and Randy Koking was already ahead of him. I think there was only one other car that was behind him, and it was quite a ways back, so I'm not certain what the extended stay would be there for James Goshen. To your point, could be something a little bit more underlying that we are not made aware of. A couple of things coming into this race as well. These drivers were originally supposed to be starting this race with only 4 sets of tires, the sets they have on for the start of this race, and 3 sets on pit road. However, they were told about maybe a half hour before the race that they were actually going to get an extra set. So 5 sets in this race for them with 125 laps. I'll tell you what really stands out to me is the fact that 125 laps is a little bit like a sprint if you consider it at Dover. It doesn't take them a whole lot of time to get around this racetrack, about what, 25 seconds, 26 seconds to complete a lap. If we get ourselves some late race restarts, you're going to see a lot of drivers ducking onto pit lane, even though they've been out there maybe only for 10, 15 laps on their set of tires to get that fresh rubber. Because as we saw there with the case of Hank Steimler, if you've got a fast car, you can make passes and make them quickly.
Absolutely, and having the track be as much of a tire killer as it is, the tires fall off extremely quick here. So if you can have an extra set in your playbook that you can go to if you have a late race caution, then absolutely go for it, because you're going to have to take a lot to beat the 63. Given how fast he's been just in the opening laps, and just how fast the 38 of Tyrion was, albeit it was on the start of the race and Johnson missed the shift, but when he got out front, it was him and Johnson that got a breakaway from Jeff Green, and they continued to keep pulling away. So I think right in the early stages, it seems like the 38, the 14, and the 63 are definitely the fastest on the racetrack at the moment. Now that can change. That might just be a short run car, but if we get into a long green flag run and we don't have a late race yellow, when do you come down to pit road if you have to? Because if you need to if you have those fresh tires that you can go to, what do we talk about fuel runs? And do you try to go on and get some fresher tires to see if that maybe you can try an undercut if you have to make a stop?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to kind of look at this race very similar to Bristol, where we ended up seeing how the undercut actually really did pay dividends. Gerald Campbell was able to overtake Hank Steinmiller, who had dominated that race just based on the fact he came to pit road about 10, 15 laps sooner than the 63 did. It's another concrete-based track, obviously a little bit longer than Bristol. Bristol, the half mile, and Dover, the mile racetrack. But just in terms of how, abrasive the track is on tires, the fact that we're running a similar surface of concrete, I think you got to kind of look at some of the strategy from Bristol, apply it over here to Dover International here tonight.
Indeed, track's very similar. This one, it's kind of like a double Bristol in a way. It's twice as long, but very similar in the way it drives. And pace car will peel off. We're getting ready to put them back to green. Lap 9 out of 125. It's Tyrion Johnson at the front to get us back underway. And Tyrion was not waiting around, and Johnson misses again, and into Jeff Green.
Oh no, that just stacked the entire field up. Jeff Green gets the losing end on that exchange as he noses it into the inside wall. You can see that the nose area there around the grill just barely hanging on by maybe a couple of tethers. These drivers do not have any fast repairs here in races that are not super speedway related, so that is a tough break there for Jeff Green, who was restarting in the 3rd position, and just like that, the front end is all torn up. Let's go back to the start-finish line where this took place.
And add insult to injury, a plume of smoke came out of that car as he was pulling away, so that is definitely day done, engine giving up. But just like the initial start of the race did not get going, did Johnson, and then he got ran into in the back by Houndshell, and that turned him down into green. And then talked about how the walls are right there at the edge of the track. There's just nowhere to go, and Green noses it in, and that's an unfortunate. He had nothing to do with any of it. He just got caught as an innocent bystander.
I'm going to go on board here real quickly with Cooper Johnson just to take a look here and see what was going on inside the cockpit. See if we can get an idea of why he didn't get started. And as soon as he got to the throttle, I'm not necessarily certain here what the red dash or the red light on the dash means, but it was blinking red. I'm almost wondering, Anthony, with back-to-back restarts, the start of this race and this first restart where he did not get going, Almost wondered if maybe he had to restart in second gear. He might have actually blown first gear.
It possibly could have, and what that red light to me says is that he was on the limiter, hitting the rev limiter. That is, so if he has blown a gear, having to start in a much lower gear, or make a higher gear of first to go and then jump into third, that is going to be detrimental to these restarts. And having that happen when you have to restart in first gear, you essentially have a lot less time or a lot less gear, as I should say, before you can actually get to shift to another one. That's why you see tracks like this. You might start in second gear because you've actually got a little bit more in the way of physical length that you can actually use. But if you have to start in first, you're at the end of first gear as you're hitting the accelerator, and then you have to shift into third, which is miles away from what first is. And that's why second gear is important at tracks like this, is because that's where most drivers start. So if he has to go the rest of the race with restarting in first, this is going to be a really big uphill climb. Now, if he can make it through a restart, then it won't be that big of a deal, because of the track like this, you never leave fourth gear once you're full song. But certainly not going to be well on the restarts.
Well, with that caution coming out, and the leaders, some of them just past the start-finish line, some of them not quite to the start-finish line. You saw Shane Tier and company had to crawl on the back straightaway to wait for the iRacing pace car to pick them up. Since they got picked up, pit road was open. Number of drivers coming to pit lane, including Cooper Johnson, Jason Hounshell, Bo Caro, Seth Harrelson, Robert Kenny, James Roth, and James Goshen. Just been notified by our broadcast colleague Matthew Rodriguez that apparently what we could liken the incident there with Cooper Johnson to was what happened to Mike Tellier last week on that final restart, where we saw him not get going, apparently missing a shift, spinning those tires, and everybody else being able to get going behind. And unfortunately at Dover, there's not a whole lot of room for a wreck to take place where you're not going to hit something, and that was the case for Jeff Green, who has taken his car back to the garage. So tough break there, not even 10 laps in. And Jeff Green, who had a strong car, was up inside of the top 5 and looking to maybe charge to the front at some point in this race. His day is over early.
He's had some hard luck this season, has had a number of good runs that come abruptly to an end, and tonight, unfortunately, no different for the 2 machine, but still plenty of time left in the season to make up some ground. As far as our restart goes, it's going to be Tyrion and now Jake Hounshell lining up in second place. And we were talking earlier about Jake Hounshell's point situation. With the hardships of Cooper Johnson, as early in the race as they are, they're still going to carry over throughout the rest of the race. He is going to be at a severe disadvantage as we go to the restart. And I'm looking through my running order, and I'm noticing a driver that's absent. And that would be the 3 of Morse Jr. Morse Jr. didn't take the start of the race, didn't even qualify for this race. He won't get points tonight. Hank Steinmiller right now runs up in about the mid-pack, about 7th to 8th place at the restart. Jake Hounshell runs second place. This is the best case scenario if you're the 0-2 team, because now you're in a perfect position to make up a lot of ground in the standings.
And apparently I found out that Christopher Morse Jr. is not racing tonight because he is under the weather, and he is going to use tonight as a drop week. So obviously we wish the best there to Chris Morse Jr. Hope that he gets better soon. Green flag back in the air. Shane Terrian going to lead Jake Hounshell into turn 1. Now remember, Jake was behind Cooper Johnson when he didn't get going. You can clearly see the front end damage on that 0-2. You've got to wonder how that's going to affect him here for the remainder of this race. Dover's not one of those aero-dependent tracks, but I have been told that it doesn't have to be an aero-dependent track for that damage to actually affect that race car.
Now he's got some rear end damage as well, because he got ran into on the stack up on the restart. So dealing with some aero damage in the front and the rear. And at the speeds that you're running at this track, while these cars don't have much aero to begin with, any little bit that you can find is definitely going to help. So it's the 0-2 is definitely going to be struggling a little bit. You can see he's actually starting to get caught up by the 29 to the outside, and the 0-0 of Jason Hounshell to the inside. Cooper Johnson has made a fantastic recovery. He's carving his way through the field in the style that Steinmiller was doing earlier. Now he's got to the inside trying to get underneath the 0-0. It's not going to work. The track not wide enough to make the pass, but now he's going to try to dive it in, and on the outside, Steinmiller gets around.
That's pole sitter versus points leader there. Teammates and Steinmiller around the top's going to pass 1, 2, 3 cars by the time he gets out of turn 4. So apparently there is a second groove here at Dover. Right there in the middle, the top side of that dark gray. Steinmiller making it work, and he is the highest right now on the freshest tires as he was on pit road under that last caution.
Tell you right now, Jake Hounshell is definitely struggling. Going into turn 1, he had to let off the throttle a lot more than Harrelson did, and Harrelson almost ran over him. Now to the outside, make that the 07 goes around the outside, takes the position away, and Hounshell falling back. Now here comes Johnson to try and make a position up, and Robert Kenny will be right behind him as well.
Robert Kenny did not have the best performances last week at Richmond. Actually ran into the barrels at the start of pit road. We've got barrels here at the start of pit road at Dover. Hopefully lightning doesn't strike twice for him as battle for third is going to take place. Kevin Dinovich and Hank Steinmiller. You know, you were talking about drivers that are missing from the field here tonight. A driver that actually back when the Grand National Series ran here at Dover, went to victory lane. Gerald Campbell is not in the field here tonight. Campbell came into this race 7th in the point stands, but he had good reason not to be here tonight, as yesterday morning, baby Clay Campbell was born into this world, and so Gerald Campbell enjoying being a father here, and obviously we wish the best to the Campbell family, so I think we can easily give him a pass here tonight, but it would have been cool to see if he could pick up not only a Grand National Series win, but a Cup Series win here at the Monster Mile.
Would definitely have been fun to watch him try to do that, but yeah, very good reason to miss the race, I should say, and glad that he's everything's got Koking hit the wall extremely hard coming out of turn 4, and that hands the position away to Steinmiller. Was watching that happen. I don't know if there's something struggling right now in the 19 car, but ever since the last couple of laps, I've seen him kind of have some issues with getting into the turns. It's not like it's turning extremely well at the minute. And as you can see, he's pushing up the track again, trying to run the middle line. So something might have gotten snapped loose in the 19.
Just about everybody has been on to pit road in these first 2 cautions, with the exception of these 3. Shane Tyrion, the race leader, and the 2 you see right here, the 29 of Kevin Dinovich and the 19 of Randy Koking, battling for the 3rd position. Little contact there off of turn 2, so if you're looking at drivers that are going to be struggling here the longer this run goes on, look for those drivers that are right now on 21-lap-old Goodyears.
And here comes Harrelson around the outside of the 19. At this point, almost hits the wall coming out of turn 4. That could have been a repeat of what happened to Koking. And ever since Koking has smacked the wall, he's having a lot of struggles trying to keep up the pace. Right now, Cooper Johnson goes around by. Give Cooper Johnson some credit. He is on fresh tires, and he's been able to go from the back of the pack all the way back up. And this is what we meant. Even if he has blown a gear, once you get up to speed, it doesn't seem to matter much because you never leave 4th. So hopefully, he's hoping that the race goes all the way to the end of the race under green, and he doesn't have to make another pit stop. That's the ideal situation for the 14 if he is missing second gear. Right now, Steinmiller slowly closing in the gap to Shane Tyrion, but everyone kind of settling out into their own groove at the minute.
They definitely are, and I'm going to double check myself on something here. I'm not necessarily 100% convinced that a number of the drivers that came down pit road under the last caution actually took on tires. In order to take a 4-tire pit stop, you're usually going to be on there in your pit box anywhere between 13 to 15 seconds. These drivers, for the most part, were only there about 7 to 8 seconds, so I think they just topped off the fuel tank. I think that there were no tires taken on for a number of our race leaders that were on pit lane about 13 laps ago.
At the very least, maybe a 2-tire change for a lot of these drivers. So that could be interesting. We've seen certainly the drivers that came down to pit road are much quicker than the ones that didn't. That much is true. So if this is the pace with even just 2 tires changed, then imagine what would happen if they changed 4 tires on that stuff. They might be, as far as Tyrion is away from Steinmiller at the moment, because Tyrion is checked out about a 2-second gap, and Steinmiller is about 2 seconds back to Harrelson. So the 2 leaders have stretched out an advantage. But Seth, if 2 tires are going to be that good, if they did indeed take 2 tires, what does that mean late in the run? If you have to come down pit road, do you risk the extra time to get 4, or do you roll the dice with 2?
I think it really all depends on how many laps are left and how far you can make it on a tank of fuel. So let's speculate that maybe you can make it on coming to pit road and just taking on a can of fuel. Then yeah, I think you might go with that 2-tire strategy. That way you don't spend the extra time on pit lane. Otherwise, if you take on 4 tires, you're more than likely just as well filling the can, filling up with 2 cans of fuel. I think if we end up getting within the window that these drivers can make it the rest of the way, I think you're going to see them take on the 4 tires, but to your point, I think if we get like maybe let's say a pit stop with 15 to go, 10 to go, somewhere in that range, yeah, I think you'd see some guys gamble with the 2-tire strategy, try and gain that track position because I think you'd probably be able to maintain it.
Yeah, especially at a track like this where the laps go by super quick and you're kind of just stuck together for a long period of time, then you can jump through the field pretty quickly. And I look back, I wanted to see if it was true, and Seth, I believe you're correct. I don't think anyone took tires on that stop that came down pit road. I think they only took extra fuel. Robert Kenny was the one that I was watching. He did not take tires. It was only a fuel stop. I saw the Cooper Johnson. He also didn't take tires. That was only a fuel stop. So they have some pace without fresh tires. That is a bit surprising to me, honestly, because the way that Steinmiller was pulling through the field, it certainly looked like he had something.
Well, the thing that also surprises me is I understand the fact that that caution came out back on lap 20. So obviously, we didn't get all that many laps run on that set of tires, but it would have made more sense to me that they not take on tires if they only had 4 sets to start this race. As documented, they were given an extra set here tonight as well. So why not use the opportunity early on to put on a set of tires and make your way up to the front of the field? Then if this thing goes into a long green flag run, spend the rest of the race trying to maintain that race lead. I think a couple of drivers might have missed an opportunity there. To your point, though, Hank Steinmiller, Cooper Johnson, even though they gave up track position to get fuel, I'm looking right now, and at least Steinmiller is running lap times slightly faster than Shane Tyrion. Not by much. Some of them are in the hundredths of a second. Every now and then he'll chip a tenth. But he is, at least for the time being, keeping pace, if not running a little bit faster than our race leader.
And that might be another thing that we need to think about as far as the way that tires go, as well as fuel. Because if those drivers only took fuel, then they might know something that we don't, and the fact that if they save a little bit on the racetrack, they might be able to make it on a 1-stop rather than potentially a 2-stop. So that might be, I don't know if you were seeing Steinmiller but coming out of turn 4, but he got something kind of loose. If they try to make it on a 1-stop, and pitting that early to get the extra bit of fuel is going to help them with the 1-stop, for these drivers that might have to do a 2-stop, that's almost as bad as having to lose track position to take on extra tires. So it's a weird game that they're playing. I know that they're running at limited fuel capacity in tonight's race. I believe it was relegated to 60% fuel capacity. So obviously it will induce more stops throughout the race. But man, the amount of strategy that goes into a race like this is amazing. The fact that even as simple as coming down pit road 6 laps into an event is all the difference between a 1 and a 2-stop strategy. If that is the case, that's all speculation, but it's crazy if that is the case.
And this is, maybe without a doubt, one of the toughest pit roads to get onto for 2 reasons. Number 1, getting onto pit road, as we're going to see right on board here with Shane Tyrion, watch it to come around here through 3 and 4. It's almost like a blind corner. All of a sudden, oh look, to the left, there's pit road entry, and you saw just barely there that orange square. That's basically the commitment cone, if you will. You have to have all 4 tires down on the left side of that orange square in order to make sure you don't get a penalty. And sometimes when you end up having pit road entry take you by surprise like that, you end up going either to the outside of that square or hitting that square, and that's to induce extra time on pit road with a penalty. So that's something these guys have to be aware of here, and hopefully they took the opportunity with how these 87 cars kind of are going to be different feeling than they were 1 season ago if they have to make green flag pit stops.
Yeah, and I'll add on to it, getting onto pit road, trying to gauge when you actually slow down to get onto pit road is even harder for some of these drivers because it comes up quick, and the banking angle going from the race surface to the apron is a very stark difference as you make the transition onto the apron. A few 10 degrees difference, and that's enough to upset a race car with little to no downforce of any sort. So have to keep that in mind as well. Tyrion has opened up a monstrous lead at the moment over Steinmiller. It is a 2.3-second lead over the 63 of Steinmiller. That would be also the points leader, Steinmiller. The guy behind him in the points, Cooper Johnson, running in third place. He is a whopping 3.5 seconds back to second place. Steinmiller, a almost 6-second gap separates him and the leader Tyrion, and then it's a gap of about half a second, a little bit over half a second from Johnson to Harrelson, and then about half second back from Harrelson to Kenny, and a miles gap back from Kenny to Dinovich. We're looking at about a 3.3-second gap and about a half a lapse difference between our race leader and sixth place. So everyone definitely finding their own footing here in tonight's one.
And if we're looking to get an idea of just how far these drivers can make it on a tank of fuel, as you alluded to, 60% fuel capacity for these drivers here tonight, our race leader might be a perfect gauge for that. Shane Terrian has not been to pit road since we started this race. Granted, he had the pacing laps under the first two cautions to be able to save a little bit of fuel, so he might be able to stretch a little bit further this run than he would to the remainder of this race towards the checkered flag, but it'll give us an idea of how far these guys can go. Kevin Dinovich actually on pit road in the 29. He was another of the drivers that was yet to make a pit stop, so we might be possibly looking at about maximum 40 laps these guys can make it on a tank of fuel, but again, we got to wait and see about this 38 when he elects to come down pit lane. And one thing I was noticing, Anthony, you were talking about the gap between Shane Tyrion and Hank Steinmiller. Since we last checked in with the interval between those two, it has opened up by half a second, and I think a big reason for that is Hank Steinmiller, in his attempt to get back up there to the race lead ahead of the 38 of Terrian, has used up his stuff quite a bit. I'm noticing that car get tight off the corner, almost get to the wall, and then when he turns it left to avoid hitting the wall, then the back end wants to step out. So I don't know if there's a terminology out there of being tight loose off the corner, but it almost looks visibly like that's what Hank Steinmiller is dealing with.
The terminology is it's a very possessed race car at the moment. It's a weird place when your tires start wearing down and then you start trying to push the car. It almost likes it sees your input and it's like, okay, you want this, and then a couple meters later, it's like, okay, now you want this, and you want a lot of it, and it'll do a lot of it. So these cars are so interesting to handle. I'm on board with him. Oh goodness, he's hit the wall in the back straightaway. Has Steinmiller on the inside of the racetrack? He smacked the inside wall. He got loose coming out of turn 2. Was riding on board with him, and it got wicked loose. Ends up hitting the wall, and it's still loose. He almost had it spin around him going out of turn 4 that time around. There's something definitely wrong with the 63.
Now the question here is, he would be able to go anywhere from 10 to 12 laps further on fuel than Shane Terrian, but I almost think with something like that, as soon as Shane Terrian dives onto pit road, if I'm that 63, I'm diving onto pit road as well.
Absolutely. You can't wait any longer. It's already to the point where any little mistake is going to send you flying out towards either the inside or the outside of the racetrack. So the sooner you get on pit road, the better. I've noticed that Tyrion, it's not all happy-go-lucky over at the 38 camp either, because I've noticed it a couple of times he's struggled coming out of these turns as well. He's not dealing with it as much. I think there's a little bit more grip on those tires than there is on the aforementioned 63 car. To your point, he hasn't had to cut his way through the field. So I think that Tyrion might be able to hold on for a little bit longer, but I don't know how much longer.
Currently about to complete his 47th lap on this set of tires. You see that he went around the 4 of James Roth, rocking that Mac Tonight scheme. Apologies if I don't get this year right. I believe it's throwback to Bill Elliott's 1997 Ford Thunderbird. Pretty nice looking scheme on that machine, but right now the only car running one lap down in the 10th position. The other lap down cars are drivers that had to come to pit lane to take on fuel for the first time this race. Kevin Dinovich in the 29 and Randy Kokine in the 19. Both have lost 2 laps as a result, and that's a thing too. So many times here, Anthony, as we had a pretty good stretch of short tracks in the midway point of this season, we saw where drivers would come down pit lane under green flag conditions, then the caution would come out and they'd find themselves trapped off the lead lap. That's something that these drivers have to be aware of. And Hank Steinmiller has lost the front end of his car. I think he's hit something else big time as he's headed for pit road.
He's definitely had a drama somewhere around on the racetrack. Was going to mention it because I saw it while you were talking, but I don't think that would have been a light tap anywhere. I think he might have looped it around and got the inside of a part of the racetrack and ended up knocking the front end off of it. Did not bring out a full course yellow, so nothing is too terrible on the racetrack to have brought it out, but I'm struggling to wonder what would have happened that wouldn't have brought one out. And I just went back and I looked at it and I think I know exactly what happened. He got into turn 3, it snapped around on him, and wham! That's a hard hit.
And then he got a shot again to the inside wall as that car started making its way down the banking, then had to limp it all the way back around on the inside of the racetrack to be able to bring it to pit road. Not the race that our points leader was looking for, especially with the fact that he showed some really good early speed, had worked his way up 8 spots in the grid from dead last to 5th before we even saw our first caution, but this is certainly going to put a dent in the points lead he carried into this race, because the guy trying to run him down for the points lead, Cooper Johnson, now slots into 2nd place.
This is a big opportunity for the 14 camp, because now with the hardships of the 63, if he doesn't take the points lead at the end of this race, he'll definitely be a lot closer by the time we head into our next event. So everyone, if you're part of Cooper Johnson's camp, you're going to be wanting to drive this race extremely cautiously, but aggressively cautiously. I don't know if that's a phrase or not, but I've made it a phrase tonight. You can't let your foot off the gas, in other words, but you definitely don't want to do what Steinmiller did. So big points night tonight for Cooper Johnson.
Oh, Shane Tyrion, man. I saw that thing starting to not turn, and I got really worried for him getting close to that orange square, but he did get below the square. He did make the commitment line, and he's on pit road for the first time here at Dover.
How cool and composed do you have to be in order to make that happen? That car was definitely going around. Had he not let off the throttle just a little, or got on the brakes a little bit more, he almost locked up going in, and if you had locked up, that would have definitely sent him out to the outside, but hits his marks. That might be a race-winning save. That was incredible.
Seth Harleson's in as well, and yeah, maybe Shane Tyrion didn't have to be worried, because I think we were worried up here enough in the booth for him, but he is going to hit pit lane here. It looks like he is going to go with the 4-tire strategy. Oh, hold on a second. You could double check this for me, but I think he's still sitting on pit road. I don't know if he might get hit with a penalty or not. I think he's down away. Either he got hit with a penalty or he got some damage at some point in this race and spent a little extra time on pit road getting it repaired, because that was a pretty lengthy pit stop there for the 38, almost 23 seconds in his stall.
I am checking, and he did make the line, so he's not going to get a penalty for not making the commitment line. Maybe speeding. Maybe we got been too fast going on to the line. I struggle to see why they would enforce that on the same lap.
Well, I'm not certain here. It might have actually been the amount of time that they would spend for a 4-tire pit stop. It really surprised me, though. I would have thought it had been a little bit faster than that, but I'm looking at some of the other guys that had pitted, and their pit times are around the same, so I don't know, maybe it just varies at track to track. Maybe it varies with car to car, but I would have thought that a 4-tire pit stop would have taken a little bit quicker than that, but apparently that's not the case.
Houndshell, though, with an extended stay on pit road, he's got a 32-second stop at the works at the moment. That's definitely going to be for damage repair.
I think he came to a stop on pit road before he even got to his pit stall. So I think this is a result of him actually calling a tow while on pit lane and teleporting to his pit box.
I wonder what that could be about then. Certainly don't think he would have run out of fuel because Johnson's still out in the race. Well, Johnson took on that extra fuel. So maybe he did try to stretch it too far. Maybe Tyrion was on the edge of how much he could actually push the car, and he was just trying to get onto pit road when he could, and maybe, just maybe, Houndshell pushed it too far. That's the only thing that I could think of. He didn't have enough damage that would have warranted the car coming to a dead stop on the pit lane, so a bit of an extra drama for the 0-2 team, and that is another points battle that might be a little bit more harder to climb as we go into the late half of the season. So that's definitely not what the 0-2 team needed for their efforts. But Johnson right now, it's all smiles as he hits the pit lane. This will be his first, or make that his second stop in the night technically, and this one will definitely be a full service stop. The last one, fuel only.
This will probably turn the race lead over to Bo Caro should he stay out this lap. And things are getting very interesting right now just based off my calculations, because I believe with the amount of laps that Cooper Johnson was able to run right there and the number of laps it took for Shane Tyrion to come to pit road, granted we also have to throw in the caution laps, the pacing laps that he saved some fuel under in the first 2 yellow flags of the day, I don't think that Shane Tyrion can make it the rest of the way without coming to pit road at least one more time. Cooper Johnson, on the other hand, he might possibly be able to stretch it the rest of the way here, might be able to save enough because he's got roughly 7, almost 8 laps, I think, of fuel more than Shane Tyrion will. It's going to be really close if any of these drivers try to roll the dice on fuel to be able to make it the rest of the way, because we are just almost to the halfway point.
And Tyrion inherits the lead after the cycle of stops, almost certain that he would. And now a huge gap back to what is second place Seth Harrelson. Kevin Dinovich is actually going to leapfrog. We had for a moment, got right up to Cooper Johnson, and Cooper Johnson had a dismal stop or a pit lane experience. One of the slowest lane times that we had seen. Well, actually, looking at it now, is kind of average, but he has lost a ton of ground to second place. Seth Harrelson now finds himself in second place, and he's got a pretty good, there's a pretty good gap between him and Tyrion. Now, here's the thing. We were talking about Tyrion not being able to make it on fuel or being razor's edge on fuel. Now that he's got such a massive gap back to second place, do you let off? And can you let off enough to even make it to the end? And to further your point, I don't think Tyrion can, but Cooper Johnson, that stop he made earlier in the race, gave him 8 laps of fuel to work with. That 8 laps, as you said, that might be all it takes. This could be Cooper Johnson's race to lose.
I'm going to kind of be generous and say that Shane Tyrion could have saved anywhere from 6 to 8 laps under the pacing periods that we had early on in this race. Even with that, if we run green to the end, I've got him projected about maybe 10 laps short of making it to the finish. Now, he was on pit road back on lap 54. Cooper Johnson was on pit lane back on lap 61, 7 laps later. So I would certainly think it'd be a lot easier for Cooper Johnson to save 3 to 4 laps of fuel on this run than it would be for Shane Tyrion to save anywhere from 8 to 10 laps of fuel. So this is going to be interesting, but then again, we have to bear in mind that we saw a lot of drivers struggling with their race cars near the tail end of this run before the pit stops began. We're not out of the realm of possibility of a caution coming out and shuffling everything back up.
What Tyrion really wanted to see is when Steinmiller bended into the inside wall, he really wanted to see a caution come out for that one, but did not get it. Later in the run, Tyrion was almost the yellow that some of these other guys wanted because he was struggling quite a bit and almost missed the pit lane. So having the race be as dynamic as it is, absolutely, it's not out of the realm of possibility with, say, maybe 15 laps to go. We get a yellow come out that shakes up the entire field and then puts everyone on level playing ground, and that could be a mad dash to the finish as well, which the fans will definitely enjoy. But if you're a strategist right now working on these numbers, trying to figure out what you can do to get your car to the finish of this race, then kind of banging your head against your the wall of your pit box, trying to figure out what can you do that's going to mitigate the damage that could be done. And man, it's going to be a big fuel battle to the end of this race. This is the first time I think this season that we've had such a huge fuel battle. Or at least a fuel race, I should say, be the determining factor of whether or not somebody actually wins this race.
Yeah, I think you're right. And seems almost appropriate that it takes place at a track like Dover, where you don't necessarily think about fuel. You think more about who's preserved their tires the best. So kind of flips the script here at the Monster Mile. After those pit stops, only 5 drivers are on the lead lap. Terry in the leader, Harrelson in second, who's about to be under fire from Cooper Johnson there. Robert Kenny holding down 4th, and Kevin Dinovich right now, last car on the lead lap in 5th. We've got 4 cars 1 lap down. Goshen, Jason Hounshaw, Bo Caro, and James Roth. Randy Koking is 3 laps down, completing the top 10. Jake Hounshaw, who came into this race with a possible chance of going back-to-back at Dover. He finds himself 3 laps down, 11th, and Hank Steinmiller, he has returned to the racetrack, albeit still badly damaged and 5 laps down. Unless something happens here in the final 55 laps of this race, he will more than likely be leaving Dover 12th in the finishing results. And you think about the fact Morse is not in the field here tonight feeling under the weather. You've got Hounshaw and Steinmiller both running outside of the top 10. This is big-time opportunity for our Daytona winner, Cooper Johnson, to not only possibly take the points lead into Nashville next week, but also open up a big gap over a lot of guys that were in pretty close proximity behind him in the standings coming into this one inside the top 5.
He's definitely going to leapfrog Morse quite a bit. He's going to leap throughout everyone that's running behind him right now, and he's going to cut into Steinmiller's lead. I don't know if you can take the points lead tonight. I think it's a little bit too big of a gap for that to happen. If there was a few more cars in the field, then perhaps he could, but I don't think with the amount that we've got running that he can do it. But definitely will cut in. By the time we get to Nashville, the points battle could be super tight. As a matter of a couple of positions will determine who the points leader is at the end of that race. And like you said, including tonight's race, we have 7 races to go on the season. Once we get to Nashville, if the points are going to be tight, then obviously we'll see what happens with that particular race. But then you look at the races that we've got coming up after that. We've got North Wilkesboro and we've got Charlotte. Those 2 races, definitely different styles of track. One is a bit longer than a short track, the other one 1.5 miles. We got Rockingham Part 2. We've got Road America, and then we have the season finale in Atlanta. That's not a whole lot of time and a whole plethora of tracks where, depending on your strengths and weaknesses, you can make up quite a few positions. And Cooper Johnson, he is in a position right now that he's decent at all the tracks that we got rest on the season, save for maybe Road America and perhaps, actually, that might be the only one. He's been pretty solid at all the track types that we've gone to so far this season. So, I don't know. It's looking pretty good if you're Cooper Johnson.
I kind of feel like Seth Harrelson's flown under our radar the last couple of weeks, but you look at his stats coming into this race. He's 6th in the overall standings. Of course, had that win back at Texas Motor Speedway, and he's only 290 points back. Again, with the classic points system, he still mathematically would be in the hunt, while Cooper Johnson can take this opportunity to run away from some of the drivers that have struggled here tonight. Seth Harrelson, on the flip side, can use this opportunity as he's up inside the top 3 to start reeling those guys in and try and make his way into the top 5 in the overall points.
Yeah, he's got a good chance to get around Jake Hounshaw and Jason Hounshaw within quick succession. He's got Christopher Morse Jr. will be next on his hit list. He could very easily jump into the top 5 in the standings by the end of, if not tonight, by the end of Nashville, could very easily get within the top 5 in the standings. And that would be big news for him because, again, he's been one of those drivers that are consistent so far this season. All season long, we've always seen him run consistently within the top 10. I would definitely put the 07 team on the list of drivers to watch out for late in the run as maybe a dark horse by the time we get to the closing rounds of Elkhart Lake and Atlanta.
There's Robert Kenny holding down the 4th position. He is now the last car on the lead lap as Kevin Dinovich just got put a lap down moments ago by race leader Shane Tyrion. Great run for him here tonight. He didn't have the best of performances we mentioned last week at Richmond. Also struggled at Michigan, so nice to see that Tabasco machine having a good run here at Dover.
Yeah, he's almost within striking distance of a podium spot. If he can get a little bit more speed under that 34 team, he might be able to get up to Harrelson and maybe overtake him for third place. But yeah, coming off the heels of the last two races, definitely a better performance, running in a top 5 spot. And I just like this paint scheme. I've never liked Tabasco much, but I do like the Tabasco car. So nice to see that 34 running so far up through the field. And then behind him, you've got the second of the two Houndshells. This would be Jason Houndshell, 5th in the standings. And I think he's in a position right now that he would overtake Jake in the standings. So he might be our 4th place in the standings coming up at the end of this race. But he's another driver that's been kind of flying under the radar consistently within our camera shot. We talk about him on a weekly basis. I don't think that we've ever kind of cognitively thought that he's within striking distance of the championship. Should the guys in the top, for the rest of the top 5 have problems, he could take the championship with a good bit of luck.
It's his first full-time season here in the Cup Series, and I think that we could safely agree maybe most improved driver on the season from the results we saw him have early on this year as opposed to what he's been able to run now. The consistency definitely there, as you mentioned, up there inside the top 5 in the point standings. And I don't know, should we have a little bet on which Houndshell goes to victory lane first here this season between himself and Jake? Because, they both have definitely had fast race cars the last couple of weeks.
And they were both super close at there's a couple of races ago that I believe that Jake almost got his first win this season. I think it was at Michigan.
I think it was too.
Where
right.
Unfortunately, I think he ran out of gas. Okay, I take back what I said earlier. We did have a race come down to fuel mileage, and unfortunately, the guy leading
Shane Tyrion! Oh, my God, sorry to cut you off, but he almost lost it off of turn 2.
Oh, goodness. I got to go back and look at that really quick. Yeah, I saw the wiggle there. That could have been a race ender for sure. That was a severe twitch on the 38. But I think that Jake is probably going to go to victory lane first. He's got the most experience in these cars, and he has been so close a couple of races this season. In fact, more than a couple of races this season. While Jason has been learning how to drive these cars efficiently, he's made great improvement this season. But I give the first of the Houndshells to win to Jake Houndshell.
Oh, got a car hard in the wall in the back straightaway there. I think that might have been James Goshen in the 85 as we were focused on this battle that's about to be for the 3rd position. He kind of broadsided the outside wall, so he was able to keep it straight. No caution yet, but we're definitely seeing the longer this run goes on that these cars are beginning to be a handful.
Indeed they are. The leader having his own bit of struggles, and now back in the midfield we have these cars running trying to stay on the lead. Well, actually, Goshen is a lap down at this point. We only have 4 cars running on the lead lap, and that would be Tyrion, Johnson, Harrelson, and Kenny running on the lead lap. And Robert Kenny, he's not in immediate danger. In fact, not in danger at all, as Randy Koking is going slowly on the back straightaway. Don't know if that was due to a loose sensation. It definitely was. He got loose coming out of 2.
And he's coming to pit road. We just saw James Roth on pit lane as well in the 4 machine. So I don't know if this is a case of that these guys have to come to pit road here based on what they've got in the tank, or if maybe they're coming to pit road now since the fuel window could be open for them to make it the rest of the way.
I take back what I said about Koking. He's retired the car. He had a problem coming off of turn 2. He didn't get loose. He just straight up slowed down. And he's retired, so there was definitely something a lot more sinister on the 19 team than just an ill-handling race car that's taking him out.
And that's a big reason why the wounded 63 of Hank Steinmiller is still out there, because in about 3 laps' time, he will pick up that 11th spot from Randy Koking, who's now out of the race, and that's more points that he's going to gain. Shane Tyrion had to let the fresher tires of Kevin Dinovich on by. Dinovich getting one of his 3 laps back the hard way. Question is, though, when does this 38 duck onto pit lane? He will be anywhere from 10 to 12 laps short of making it to the finish. At this point in time, if he were to pit now, he would be good to make it to the checkered flag on what he would have in the tank, but I've seen a lot of drivers with some issues here on this run. The last thing you want to do, come to pit road, be trapped off the lead lap, and have to either rely on the lucky dog or maybe a couple of cautions to get the free pass to get back in the lead lap, because what was it last week at Richmond or even the week before? It was one of those 2 short track races where that actually did happen to Shane.
Yeah, indeed. We had a round of stops come by, and I think it was at Bristol where we had a round of stops come by, and a lot of drivers ducked on to the lane, and then yellow came out due to a spin and caught almost the entire field a lap down at one point. I believe that we restarted it was the Bristol race, and we restarted with about 7, 8 drivers on the lead lap, and we were only about a quarter of the way through the race. Now, a lot of those drivers did make up positions again and were able to get back onto the lead lap. I think we finished with about 10 or so on the lead lap, which is pretty significant when you consider that we've only got 4 running right now on the lead lap. But yeah, Tyrion was one of those drivers that had the issue of getting caught a lap down. So there was a big mountain for him to climb when he was trying to get back onto the lead lap. He did manage to get a decent finish out of that one, but you don't have to want to put yourself in that situation, especially when you have less than 30 laps to go, which in a couple of laps, we're going to hit less than 30 to go. So in a track like this where it's a mile long, and especially with so few cars on the lead lap.
Just had the 0-2 of Jake Hounshell. He hit the pit wall trying to come to pit lane.
And that is a race ender, and that is the danger of the Dover pit lane.
Robert Kenny was just coming to pit lane ahead of him. He made it on, but a whole front end ripped off of Jake Hounshell's machine. A bad night goes worse for the defending winner here at Dover.
And I think he's retired the car. That's race done for the 0-2. So another position that Steinmiller can gather, but a heartbreak for the defending winner of Dover. And that's got to be a huge morale killer. And that could have happened to Tyrion earlier in the race. Remember when he was a bit fast coming onto the pit lane, almost overdrove the line, and that could have happened to actually could have happened to a number of drivers so far this race.
Hounshell to the garage. That's another position and more points that Hank Steinmiller will pick up as he will crack back up into the top 10. Been watching this right here, these 3 cars. Now, 2 of them are battling for position. Bo Caro, first car, well, actually second car now, 1 lap down. James Goshen separated by James Roth. He's right now running in 6th. This is a battle for a spot inside the top 5. The meat in the sandwich is James Roth, who is 3 laps down in the 9th position, but the 42 and the 85, they were exchanging a bit of contact a few laps ago, and I was thinking if we're going to see that late race yellow come out, it might be in this vicinity of the field.
Indeed, it could. You were battling extremely close together in close proximity late in the run. Robert Kenny is now 2 laps down. Reason being is he made a stop. He's good to go for the rest of the race, and that might be a money move if we get a yellow, as the leaders the rest of the leaders, I should say, haven't come down pit road. The 0-0 now of Hounshell makes his stop, so we're getting to see what these drivers' strategies are going to be. Obviously, he wants the fresh tires. He's seen the way that these cars are handling, and he might be feeling the way his car is, and he doesn't want to have to deal with it any longer than he has to. So, good to go to the end of the race. He is. And really quickly, want to mention that James Roth, not consecutively, the streak was broken, but another race, another top 10 guaranteed.
And we almost just had another victim courtesy of the pit wall. That was James Goshen trying to get onto pit lane. He just barely skidded his way past those yellow barrels. I think he did make the commitment line as well as he comes down to the attention of his crew. Jason Hounshell just now finishing up and leaving pit road. If we're looking at the lap times right now compared to what they're currently running, well,
here comes the leader.
You know what? I'll forget the question because it doesn't matter now. I was going to ask about if you're Cooper Johnson, do you try and short pit ahead of the 38, but 38 is on pit lane, giving up the race lead potentially here for his final pit stop of the day.
definitely much earlier than he needed to come down to pit road, but risking the degradation of the tires, he's elected to come down pit road, so he's guaranteed to have the freshest tires that he possibly can, and this could be beneficial to him as he can make up some ground on Cooper Johnson. So if Johnson cannot make it to the end of the race and has to come down pit road to top off with a little bit of fuel, then we could possibly see him retake the lead. Tyrion hits his mark, 4-tire stop undoubtedly for the 38, and that hands the lead over to Cooper Johnson, who now puts Tyrion a lap down, possibly even 2 laps down by the end of this, depending on what the rest of the stop's like.
Cooper Johnson has done just about everything here this season. Of course, he started out the year with a victory. He's had top 5s and top 10s, led 60 laps coming into tonight's race. Even led atop the point standings for a good portion of the beginning of this season after that Daytona win. But the one thing he hadn't done coming into tonight was capture a pole position, and he managed to do that here this evening. So just about every single column of his stat category now does not have a 0 in it anymore. But I'm certain that he would love to be able to pick up his second win on the season here. The question is, though, when do you come to pit road if you're the 14? You could run the risk of possibly staying out longer, have a caution come out, and trap a number of the competition a lap down. You're losing time as a result of that, or you could end up coming down pit road here in the next 2 laps or so and use those final 20 laps to lay down Q laps trying to run down the 38 potentially for the race win.
Now, here's an interesting situation that he finds himself in. He's the only driver right now that's on the lead lap. Everyone else is 1 or more laps down. In fact, second and third place are the only 2 drivers that are only a lap down. So you can back off considerably here. You are in no immediate threat of any driver taking a position away from you. And we were talking about earlier in the race or earlier after that last pit stop cycle before this one, he was one of the only drivers that had the potential to make it all the way to the end of the race without having to make another stop if he saved some fuel. He's got plenty of space to do that. Now, remember there was a race, and it might have been just a fever dream, but Tony Stewart was in a similar position where he had about a lap over everyone else, and he actually ran out of fuel with about a lap to go, and he was able to coast all the way to the finish of the race. Johnson is in that position right now. Do we see him, even if he is on fumes, stay out and roll the dice? Because he, like I said, not in any immediate danger.
Yeah, it's kind of depends on what his mentality is right now. You talked about earlier how he's got a big picture race with the hardships that a lot of other drivers around him in the point stands have had. Even if he finishes out the night with a second or third place finish, is going to gain him a lot of points in the standings. But at the same time, as mentioned, it's been a while since he's been to victory lane the season opener. So it's almost, it all depends on his mentality here. Is he big picture championship racing, or is he going for the win in terms of his mentality? He's going to have 18 laps to go, 17 and a half here on the back straightaway. If indeed he can make it to the checkered flag, he will be doing it on 65 laps of fuel. I don't know if he can make it or not now with the fact that Shane Tyrion came to pit lane as early as he did. The thing that I'm wondering, though, is did Shane come to pit lane with just fumes, or did he come down pit road just to make sure that he was absolutely going to have enough fuel to make it to the finish? We don't really know how much fuel was left in the tank of that 38 when he came down to his cruise, so we don't have a clear idea of just how far these guys can go on a tank, and Cooper Johnson's going to potentially give up the race lead here coming to pit lane. So now here, Anthony, here's the question. We asked each other this earlier. 17 laps to go. I don't think he's going to have to get it packed full of fuel. Is this an opportunity for 2 tires?
I think it might be. The 2-tire stop, we saw how well these cars were handling on a no-tire stop. And now, granted, it was only 6 laps into the run. But if you go with a 2-tire stop, you're going to have a lot of wear on the left side of the tires. And while the left sides are not as critical as the right sides around this racetrack, it's definitely going to play factor. Get some fuel. Right side's going on at least. Here comes the 38 down the front straightaway, easily going to bypass the 14 and loses the lead, does Cooper Johnson. It is going to be a 4-tire stop. He might go a lap down if he's not careful. that undercut that Tyrion pulled on is significant, a massive undercut, and I think one too big to overcome as they're getting it packed full of fuel. He's actually staying on pit road. What has
Oh
happened to the
no.
14?
Is that a penalty? Was that a speeding penalty, perhaps? Because this is certainly looking like he is being held on pit lane. Oh, that is such a tough break there for Cooper Johnson.
And so drama on lap 111 of this race, and he's still stuck there. Something tells me this is a bit more than a penalty. This might be an accumulated penalty that he's taken on throughout the entirety of the race. He might be serving it now. Something not happy on the 14 as he's gone 2 laps down, 7th place, and now he comes back on track. This is the worst case scenario for the 14 team.
I believe it was a speeding penalty. The penalty can take anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds to complete. Compound that onto the fact that he would have spent about 20 to 25 seconds having the service done on his race car to change those 4 tires. So that was almost a minute in total that he spent sitting in his pit stall. Subsequently falls 2 laps down to the 8th position. More than likely, had he been able to make the pit road speed correctly, he'd be running in the 2nd or 3rd position. But now, Harrelson jumps up to 2nd. Robert Kenny now up into the podium as we close it on 10 laps to go.
How about that? These drivers are going to benefit for the hardships of the 14 team, and now we could possibly see Robert Kenny. I don't think he's had a podium this season, so this might be his first one on the season. And Seth Harrelson hasn't had a podium in quite a while, so this would be his first one in a long time for the 07 car. So absolutely stellar if you're part of their camps, but if you're part of Cooper Johnson, now here's the difference. Cooper Johnson's still going to make up some points in the overall standings. Not going to be as much as he would like to have had. Steinmiller's still behind him. Again, it's not going to be, it's not certainly going to not be the side by side battle we were hoping to see going in to Nashville, but certainly going to not be all for naught this race. But wow, no one's been able to touch Tyrion this entire race. Now a 20-second lead over Seth Harrelson. And you can about kiss this race goodbye unless some kind of... we've seen crazier this race, so I'm not going to, knock on wood, but I firmly believe we're looking at the winner of tonight's race.
Shane Tyrion got his first Cup Series win about a month ago at Michigan, looking to be yet another multi-time winner on the season, joining the likes of Christopher Morris Jr., Hank Steinmiller, Gerald Campbell, John Whitendorf, Blaine Atkin, and Ryan Lutz. He holds almost 20 seconds back to Seth Harrelson, and one thing that
he almost lost it coming out of turn make that turn 3. I'm sorry, turn 2 rather, going down the back straightaway. Was heading straight for the inside. Didn't mean to cut you off, but that could have been a very similar situation to what Steinmiller had happened to him.
And that's not the first time we've seen him have a little bit of an issue coming off of turn 2. Got to make sure he keeps that thing underneath him here for the final 8 laps or so. Cooper Johnson just picked up a spot on Bo Carroll, so move him up to 6. And I do believe that in terms of points that he would pick up on Hank Steinmiller, Johnson has obviously been out in front and led some laps here tonight. I don't think Hank Steinmiller has led a lap here this evening. If I remember correctly, back to the classic point system, it's 5 points for a lap led. So those would be 5 very valuable points there for Cooper Johnson as well in his attempt to try and run down his teammate for the points lead, at least have the gap be somewhat closer when we get to Nashville next week. Johnson actually going to try and unlap himself here, put himself now to -1. Shane Tyrion going to give him plenty of room to move on by.
Indeed he will. No sense battling him. There's no immediate danger from anybody at the moment, so let the 14 on by, and right now, yeah, the closest competition to Tyrion is going to be 20 seconds back, so still 20 seconds back, so all clean running. And yeah, to your point, with the way the points are, Johnson definitely not is definitely not out of the woods. He's definitely got some he's jumped a lot more than we would have previously considered, but when you consider what could have happened, you know he's always going to be the what if. What if I hadn't been speeding? And I don't even think it was a speeding penalty, because that was an aggressive speeding penalty. If that if that indeed is what was happening. He'd made the commitment line. There's no threat of that. I don't know what happened, to be right. I think it had to have been a speeding penalty, but either way, the extended stop on pit road definitely hurt him, but he's made his way back up to 6th place, and he is closing in on Kevin Dinovich. So that's going to be another position that he could potentially gather back up. He's about 10 seconds up the road, and it is closing at a considerable rate. I don't think there's enough laps in order to do that, but that could be another position gain to get at least back into the top 5.
Possible battle for 4th place here as Dinovich on the same straightaway as Jason Hounshell. I saw the telemetry really lowering quickly on Bo Caro. Wondered if we might have had an incident on the track. Nope, he was actually coming down pit lane to the attention of his crew as he was trying to stretch it on fuel to the conclusion of this race. Going to come about 2.5 laps short of doing so as Shane Tyrion hits the start-finish line this time out of turn 4. He'll see 2 laps to go. It's been a pretty dominating performance here by Shane Tyrion. He led the first lap at this race despite starting on the outside of the front row. He had to hold off a charge by Hank Steinmiller, had to hold off a charge by Cooper Johnson, but for the most part, he's kept everybody in his rearview mirror the entirety of this race at Dover.
Yes, he's gotten out in the front and has put on a textbook race so far tonight, and the pit stops was definitely what helped him. Coming down early as he takes the white flag, 1 lap to go in tonight's event. Once he got down on pit road, he never really looked back. He hit his marks every time. He almost missed it, and if he hadn't missed it, could have been bad. It hasn't been all happy and smiles at the 38 crew. The car definitely handling badly, but you couldn't tell because out of turn 4, final time, he wins tonight at Dover, and that is about as dominating a run as we're going to see so far this season.
Mason Dixon, 125 belongs to Shane Tyrion, who becomes the 7th multi-time winner on the season in Season 2 of the G-Force Hijinx Clothing Cup Series. It's interesting because after Michigan, we talked to him after Bristol, we talked to him after Richmond. He said, man, I feel like I let those race wins get away. Here tonight, though, some sweet redemption from the last couple of weeks as he finally is able to get it done. He'll get to do some more burnouts here. And this time it's at the concrete monster mile of Dover International.
This is not an easy track to win at, and not an easy track to win at by that big of margin. So absolutely perfect strategy going throughout the race. And we were wondering if he come down too early, and obviously the question was no. He came down at the perfect time, ends up getting a win. He almost got knocked out early in the race when Cooper Johnson had his miscues on the start and restart, but was able to pull out of it. And he never looked back throughout this entire event. Burns it down in front of the fans here on the front straightaway. You got to know he's feeling good about that. He's way too far back to make any impact on the point standings. Came into the season a bit late to really drive home the fact that he is a championship contender. But if he had come in earlier in the season, imagine what the season would look like if Shane Tyrion was a constant driver this season. We could be looking at not only a multi-race winner, but a points leader.
How about this? Some dual burnouts there with his teammate Robert Kenny, as both of them going to finish on the podium. Tyrion with the win, Kenny in 3rd, separated only by Seth Harlson, who finally pops back up inside of the top 5 this season. As those two continue to celebrate here, let's take a look at the finishing results from tonight's event. I kind of found it interesting that only 2 drivers in the field here tonight that finished up inside the top 10 finished in the top 10 one season ago. One of them was Seth Harlson, who finished 6th at this racetrack last season. The other one was Hank Steinmiller, who just barely managed to finish this race out inside of the top 10, but talked about Jason Hounshell, how consistent he has continued to be here down the home stretch. Another solid run for him in 4th. And how about Kevin Dinovich? Dinovich was one of those guys, kind of like Shane Tyrion, who did not come to pit lane until that first round of green flag pit stops, and he's able to snag a top 5. I'll have to double check, but I think this might be his first top 5 on the season. Nope, it's his second top 5 in the season, but a great run there for the 29.
Indeed, making it inside the top 5. Cooper Johnson recovers for a 6th place tonight with the extended stay on pit road that last time out. Not quite sure what that was all about. We might be able to get some info on that later, but will round off in 6th. James Roth will continue his top 10 runs as he is finishing 7th place tonight in the 4 machine. Another solid finish for Roth. Bo Caro finds sway in 8th place. This is, I think, one of his best finishes on the season. A solid top 10. James Goshen will round out in 9th, and in the final spot in the top 10 are points leaders Hank Steinmiller, which, according to my maths, I think is going to remain the points leader going into Nashville. So not a terrible night, but certainly not an ideal night for the 63 team.
Yeah, came into this race 67 points ahead of his teammate Cooper Johnson. Obviously, that will be eaten into a bit, but with the fact that Cooper Johnson only finished 4 positions ahead of Hank Steinmiller, will not be nearly as huge a gap cut into as it could have been had Johnson finished up in where it looked like he was destined, either the 2nd or 3rd position here tonight. A lot of drivers, though, they had some struggles here this evening at Dover, including the defending winner of this race, Jake Hounshell. He finished the race early in the garage area. Randy Koking also had an issue off on the back straightaway and came to pit road, made the hard left-hand turn to the garage area. And Jeff Green never got out of the blocks, involved in an incident on the first restart of the race, nose into the inside wall, and his night was over. About 10 laps into tonight's festivities. Christopher Morse Jr., of course, as we documented, under the weather. They credit him for 14th here tonight, but he'll be using tonight's race here as Dover as one of his drop week options, which we will know the results of those, which weeks drivers determined to drop in the next couple weeks or so, getting closer to that season finale. But let's see if we can now go down a long pit lane down around the garage area and see if we can talk with some of our podium finishers. Well, we start things off with a guy who picks up his first top 5 on the season and his first podium finish on the season, and that's the Tabasco machine of Robert Kenny. Hey, Robert, Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Oh, man, I mean, obviously, very strong race car here today. Not a whole lot of momentum in the last couple of weeks at the short tracks, but Dover awfully kind to you here tonight. Looked like that car was pretty stellar. A lot of drivers out of shape. I didn't really see you dealing with a lot of handling issues, but then again, sometimes what we see on the outside is not what the driver's dealing with on the inside. So what were some of the challenges that you had to deal with here at the Monster Mile?
Yeah, during practice, they said, be careful right front, it could blow, so I backed up my corners so the right front wouldn't kill itself after 15 laps or so. And then after about 30, 35, the rear end would start to come around because I was trying to drive it off the right rear, but not too much. So it would eventually get loose, at least for me, but it would drag that right front no matter what I did, so it was just try to keep it as cool as I could, even though it still hit like 400 degrees, and just hope it doesn't blow before you pit.
Well, speaking of pit road, this was an extremely challenging pit road to get onto in any car that you drive here, but especially with these lower downforce machines. We saw a lot of drivers have struggles to get on pit road. How was getting on pit road for you personally? Because we kept looking around and it seemed like you were the one driver that didn't have many things happen to him trying to get onto pit road.
Well, the first time I tried to get on pit road under green flag, I kind of spun into it a bit. The rear end came around to me on the entry of 3, so it was just like, all right, try to back it down as much as I can. Oh, they're the water barrels. Don't want to hit those again. And barely made it in the first time. I think I swung to the other side of the spectrum too much, because on my final green flag stop, I guess I gave up way too much time, because even though I was on fresher tires for 5 to 10 laps than the 07, who I was trying to get around, I only gained 2.5 seconds on him. So it was just, I needed a good middle ground. I was too far to both sides of the spectrum trying to get into pit road.
Now, this kind of marks the middle race of 5 straight short tracks that we're going to. We had Bristol, Richmond the last couple of weeks, Dover here tonight, and the next 2 weeks we go to Nashville and North Wilkesboro. So obviously last week at Richmond we saw it didn't exactly go all that well for you. A good run here tonight. So how important is that as far as momentum heading into these final 2 short tracks?
at least for me, I don't think it means that much because to me, Dover's not really a short track. It's got enough banking where you can still carry speed. In reference to Richmond last week, the car wouldn't turn for me, so I just decided to give up and killed the car so it would never come back. That's usually what I do when I don't like the car and how it's driving. Um, but yeah, we'll see what these next two tracks do. Hopefully, the car runs well and turns and does what I want. But if not, look for me inside a tire barrier or some water barrel.
All right. Well, Robert, obviously, congratulations on best finish of the season so far. Nice podium finish there, just behind your teammate in the 38, Shane Tieran, who we'll be talking with momentarily. Let's now turn the microphone over to you for some thank you, sponsors, and shoutouts.
Yeah, I just want to thank league admins for putting on the races every week. You guys for broadcasting these. Got Sim Speed Shop on the car, Astro Gaming, and even though they have no idea it's on the car, I also have Tabasco. So thank them for not sending me cease and desist. And yeah, just hopefully the rest of the season is looking up.
Well, that's Robert Kenny, P3 here tonight at the Monster Mile. Congratulations on a good run there, Robert, and hopefully we don't see you bin the car next week at Nashville. Be good to see you have another good run, so best of luck to you.
All right, thanks.
Second place, Seth Harrelson, now standing by. Hey, Seth, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yes, sir.
Man, good to see you get another solid outing here tonight at Dover. We were talking moments ago there with Robert Kenny about how it kind of looked like his car wasn't experiencing a lot of the tightness and the looseness that we saw a lot of other drivers to an extreme really deal with, especially off of turn 2. Your car looked pretty well planted as well. What little more do you think you need in terms of strategy to be up there for the race win?
I had nothing for Shane. I mean, he was in another zip code, unfortunately. So we really needed to get him on pit strategy, have him have an issue on pit road or something, or catch him in a yellow or something like that. So that was my only chance of really getting a win here tonight.
Now, we saw earlier in the race that there was a lot of chaos during the opening start and restart, and throughout the run, cars would start falling off the tires would start falling off, and then the cars would start getting a lot of oversteer. How did your car feel in the long run, and the strategy that you used to get into the second place position? It was definitely a winning one. How did you feel about your overall race strategy and how the race went as the run went on? Because I don't think anybody expected, with the ways the cars were handling, that the green flag run at the end would last as long as it did.
Yeah, I mean, they warned everybody that the right front we had to really take care of. So there were different strategies early on. You had a lot of people really saving early on. So that's why you were seeing a lot of jockey for position. But long term, the car was pretty good. I got down to 2% on the first pit cycle. Second cycle, I blew it as I got into the entry of pit road. So I stayed out there as long as I absolutely could to possibly get Shane to come in a little bit earlier and trap him down with a yellow or something like that. So I think my strategy was good, but I mean, he was in another zip code as far as speed was concerned.
You know, obviously, Seth, we were talking about drivers' positioning coming into this race with only a handful of races left on the season, 6 after tonight's festivities at Dover. You came into this race 6th in the standings, 290 points out with the classic point system still mathematically in the hunt, and a number of the guys that were ahead of you in points had some issues here tonight. We saw Houndshell finish this race in the garage area. Morse didn't start. Steinmiller ran into some problems with a badly damaged car. Even Cooper Johnson hit with a speeding penalty. So certainly you're going to gain a lot of ground on those drivers. With still 6 races left in the season, how laser focused are you to still kind of be of the mentality that you're still in this thing, still have a shot for that championship in the season finale at Atlanta?
Absolutely. If I could come in here each race and keep my nose clean, I have a chance. I need some luck, but if I could take care of what I need to do, get top 5s and take care of the car, I'll have a chance at it.
So it could certainly be the first step in a late season charge for one Seth Harrelson. Congrats on a great second place run here tonight, Seth. And now we're going to let you have the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout outs.
I want to thank you guys. First of all, you do a great job. Thanks, Chris, for putting on the league, and my teammates, Hank and Cooper.
Harrelson P2 here tonight in the Mason-Dixon 125 at Dover International. Congratulations, Seth, and hopefully you can keep this momentum up into Music City, Nashville next week.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Go down to victory lane, second time this season. Shane Tyrion celebrates in the G-Force Cup Series. Hey Shane, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you.
Man, the last couple of weeks, we talked to you and you said, man, I feel like I let those ones get away. You did not let this one get away here tonight. I don't even think you let anybody get to your back bumper outside of those first couple of starts and restarts. That thing was flying, but a couple of moments up here in the booth where we were looking, we're going, oh boy, because you got loose off of two a couple of times. You looked a little hot coming onto pit road for that first cycle of pit stops. Was there any point that you yourself were worried that you might bend that machine?
A little bit. I mean, I there was one point in the race like I have enough lead if caution comes out and we end up staying on old tires or something. I was like, I'm just gonna push it and see what happens. Almost hit the wall twice that I did that. So just went back to just riding. But yeah, I definitely thought I was gonna kill it off the turn to this one where I got loose and then almost overcorrected into the outside wall, and that scared the living crap out of me.
Now, you had an extremely large gap back to second place, and a part of that was due to the fact that some of your closest competitors had their own hardships when getting onto pit road. But speaking of, we were wondering how close that fuel was going to be at the late run for some of the drivers, given the fact that some of them came down when we had the first yellow under lap 6. But we knew that you had to pit late in the run, but how far could you have pushed it? Because we both think that you pitted early, and surely that was for tires, and that was the winning strategy. But how far could you have made it on a run, and how was your car feeling over the long runs? Because it seemed like that everyone tonight was struggling once we got past about 30 laps into a run.
So I was able to only go like when I pit on that first pit stop. I had 1 lap of fuel left, even with the caution laps there, so I don't think anyone could have made it on 2 stops. So when I pit after that first one, I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna split this one in half. Instead of going 60, I'm gonna go 30. So actually didn't end up going 30. I went 50, and then I pit. So I pit because I wanted an advantage, because I knew even if someone pit behind me early, I was like, well, they're not gonna. There's only a second a lap faster, so I can just wait 5-6 laps maybe and then pit. But still ended up being one of the first ones to pit, and it kind of worked out. But the car got loose. Steinmiller actually blew a right rear tire, and then when I pit on my first pit stop, I had a 6% left on my right rear tire, and I wasn't even sliding it, so that was kind of scary. So the right rear tires were definitely burning a lot, and I think that's what the handling issues you guys saw tonight.
Wow. Yeah, definitely a lot closer racer's edge on those Goodyears than we originally thought up here in the booth. No doubt about that. Mentioned to Seth Harrelson about the fact that this is the middle race in a 5 straight short track stint. Bristol, Richmond, tonight Dover, and then Nashville and North Wilkesboro in the next 2 weeks. Really, if you look at all 5 of those tracks, they may be short tracks, but they're all completely different. But now you're one of 7 drivers that has taken multiple wins here this season in the Cup Series. What's the goal now heading down this home stretch, going to tracks like Nashville and North Wilkesboro?
Well, I gotta buy Nashville. I don't have the track. I've never raced the track, so I don't know what to expect from that. And then as far as the rest go, I don't know. I'm new to these cars, so every time I go to these tracks, I'm learning right then and there. So I'll just take it as I go at this point.
Well, he may be learning, but he's obviously a quick study. Shane Tyrion with his 2nd win on the season here in the Vintage Clothing Cup Series. Congratulations, Shane. And now we'll give the opportunity for some Victory Lane thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, I want to thank Evil Controllers. They've been with me for such a long time now. It's been great. You guys for broadcasting. I was actually up in the booth with you the other day. That was fun. And then of course these guys are letting me race. It's been a lot of fun. I've done 5 races, finished no worse than 2nd, which is mind-boggling to me. And then I want to thank my, I guess you could say, teammate Robert Kenny. The Tabasco Fiasco is what we've been calling him. So good run for him. And then yeah, thank you guys.
Shane Tyrion gets to burn it down here at the Monster Mile with his 2nd win on the season. Congratulations there, Shane, and looking forward to see if he can keep that 1st or 2nd finish streak at Nashville next week. And that is going to conclude our coverage here tonight for the Mason-Dixon 125. It's interesting because if you look at last season as opposed to this season, Anthony, the big story week after week back in season 1 was drivers and their ability to keep the rear end of the car underneath them. But after the 87 cars had their update, really a typical Dover race coming into this one with them having to preserve that right front, as we heard there from Shane Tyrion.
Yeah, these cars definitely handle much differently than they did earlier in the season, and it kind of trips the driver up. I think we touched on it last week where it trips the driver up where you've learned how to drive a car for so long, and then all of a sudden it's almost like you have to relearn how to drive the car. Now, thankfully, this is the first time that we've been to Dover this season, so they didn't have to relearn how to drive the car, but we have a couple races coming up that they're going to have to learn how to do that, and it does. Tonight, we saw that the right front, the whole right side of the car was the biggest issue that they were having tonight. We heard about the tire go down that Hank Steinmiller had. That kind of stuff is now creeping back into their minds because it used to be you just had to keep the car going straight and the tire wear wasn't as bad. Now you have to worry about, you do have a much stabler car, but the expense of having a higher tire wear. So now you have to think about tires more often. It's a big game that these drivers are going to have to learn late in the season because we only have 6 races to go and now left on the season. Nashville, North Wilkesboro, the next 2. So more short tracks, not as much a tire killer North Wilkesboro is, but certainly Nashville is. So have to be careful when we head to Nashville in a week's time.
And I just get the feeling that we might possibly be setting up for some late season drama as well, because if you look at the last 2 road courses we've been to, Hank Steinmiller's been consistent, Cooper Johnson's been consistent, but we see the little Achilles heel here tonight. If you look at the top 4 and the point standings coming into this race, none of them finished in the top 5 here tonight. On the flip side, the drivers that came into this race 5th and 6th in points, 253 and 290 points respectively out of the top spot, they finish up inside of the top 5. So it's going to condense that top 6 in points together even more, plus the fact we don't know which weeks these particular drivers are going to drop, which gets completely eliminated, so the points could be even closer. And you talk about the short tracks, we've also got Charlotte, which gave us a great race earlier on this season, coming up soon here on the schedule. Road America, a road course for the penultimate race on the season. It's certainly looking like it's going to shape up with maybe a handful of drivers still eligible for that championship when we get to that season finale in Atlanta.
And throw in Rockingham just for good measure. So they've got, it's going to be a lot tighter. And I have a feeling that a lot of these drivers might drop tracks such as Rockingham. They might drop North Wilkesboro, potentially even Road America, even though that it's a big points day if you don't drop that race. So it's interesting, but they cannot drop Atlanta as far as I'm aware. So we do know that everyone will have to run Atlanta that wants to run Atlanta. So, with the points getting this tight late in the season, we have not only the potential, but we are almost certainly going to have some late season drama. And I'm looking at a couple of guys that potentially, if they have a couple of good runs, they might end up stealing some positions away from some other guys in the standings, particularly the Houndshell brothers. We talked about it earlier. They've been quiet. Do I think that they have? Do I think that they can win a championship this season? I think it might be a little bit much of a bit too much of an ask for them to maybe win a championship, but certainly a top 3 in the standings, definitely on the table.
It's interesting because it seems like the FRN broadcasters are coming home here down the home stretch of the schedule. Last week we were in McCrory country at Richmond. This upcoming week at Nashville, we head into Rodriguez territory. Matt Rod's home track there at Nashville Short Track is where we're going to be hosting the Nashville 150, a day to night race as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how the track transitions for these 87 cars. And that race is going to be next Tuesday night. Green flag scheduled to fly at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Continuing down the home stretch of this schedule, getting ever closer to determining who will be the champion of Season 2 of the G-Force Cup Series. But Anthony, has been a great one here tonight at Dover International. A dominating performance by Shane Tyrion to pick up his 2nd win on the season. Appreciate you joining me in the booth.
It's always fun to go to Dover, a little ways up the road from where I'm at, so not too far away to get here, and always fun to call a race with you. I like getting into the late season because a lot of the drama starts ramping up, so I cannot wait for the rest of the season.
Absolutely gonna be a good one here as we will be at Nashville next week. Hope you guys will join us for that. For Anthony McCurry, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.